Hi everyone, and welcome to Friday Night Live. I'm your host, Crystal Fry, and tonight we are talking about vulnerability and what it really means to be vulnerable. So, of course, when you think of the word vulnerable, you think of, I'm going to read the definition or a definition, being susceptible to physical or emotional attack or harm. And specifically as that relates to a person, it's usually someone in need of special care, of support or protection because of their age, because of their disability, because they're at a risk of falling prey to abuse or to neglect. So when you think about the way that vulnerability is defined, or the way being vulnerable is defined, it's usually seen as a negative trait. It's usually seen as the opposite of strength. So in light of that, and because I'm always interested in other people's opinions, I shot out a question to see what other people thought, to get a little bit of feedback on what vulnerable means to them, on what being vulnerable means. So some of the feedback I got, trust and openness, someone who's optimistic about possibilities, someone who's easily preyed upon, and an inability of a person to fight for themselves. So just kind of looking at those things, you've got on the one hand, trust and openness, being open to possibilities. You've also got on the other side, someone who's easily preyed upon, someone who's not able to really fend for themselves. And I was really excited to see both sides of that because it kind of confirmed what I'm getting ready to say to you next. Your view of what it means to be vulnerable is likely shaped by your experiences. From times when you yourself have been vulnerable, from what you have felt, and what the outcome of being vulnerable has been. So whether you were in a relationship and you opened up to someone and you were vulnerable and that built trust in the relationship, maybe that you're seeing that as a positive outcome, or if you've been vulnerable in a relationship and you've opened up and that actually created an opportunity for that person to take advantage of you. That's going to result in some negative feelings about what it means to be vulnerable. Both sides are easily justifiable. Both sides, of course, it's all in what you've experienced when you've been vulnerable with someone else. So tonight, what I want to do is I want to challenge your view on vulnerability and maybe give you a little bit of a different perspective. Hi, everyone who's watching live. Thank you for joining. And for those watching in the replay, welcome here as well. Tonight we are talking about vulnerability and what it means to be vulnerable. So as you're thinking about relationships in particular, in order for your relationships to be successful, you've got to have trust, right? And in order to trust someone, in order for someone to trust you, there has to be a measure of vulnerability there. You have to be willing to be open. You have to be willing to open yourself up. That person also has to be willing to open themselves up. So there's a measure of vulnerability there. Hey, Jamira, thanks for watching. Glad you were able to join us tonight. We're talking all about vulnerability and what it means to be vulnerable. So as you're wanting to build relationship, build trust in your relationship, you've got to be able to lower your guard and let someone else in. And that is a risk, especially if you're someone who's been in a relationship and you've been hurt by another person before, whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a business relationship, whether it's a family relationship. Relationships require trust in order for them to be successful. Trust requires you to be vulnerable. Happy Thanksgiving, Jamira. I hope you guys had a great one. I know we did. So when you're putting yourself at risk, that's not always an easy thing to do, especially if you have been in a place where someone has taken advantage of you. But in addition to being vulnerable with other people, one of the things I want to challenge you with tonight is considering whether or not you're being vulnerable with yourself. Whether or not you're being open and honest and being vulnerable with yourself, whether or not you are open to change, whether or not you're open to taking a step, even if you're not 100% sure where that step is going to lead, are you willing to be open to the possibilities that are there? Are you willing to put yourself at risk in order to reap a reward? With great risk or with great great reward comes great risk. Wow, that is a mouthful for me tonight. So are you willing to let other people see you, the real you? You know, not the one that you put on for everyone else, for the world to see for show. Are you willing to let them see the real you? And a little bit deeper here, are you willing to look in the mirror and see the real you? That's being vulnerable. That's being open. That's being honest with yourself. That's looking in the mirror and seeing your flaws and all, and being accepting of what you see. Being accepting of the person who is there. Being accepting of understanding that though you may not be perfect, and I promise you you're not, none of us are you willing to be vulnerable and accept that? Are you willing to look behind the curtain and see where there are areas where maybe you could improve? Are you willing to look and see where there are places that maybe need a little bit of work? Are you also willing to look back there and see, hey, I'm a pretty awesome person. Sure, I have some things I can work on, but you know what? At the core, I'm a decent human being. So being able to be vulnerable with yourself is something that I think many of us struggle with. I know I certainly did. Being vulnerable was not really a place where I wanted to be because I had the thought process and the idea that if I was vulnerable, then that meant I was weak. To me, at a particular time in my life, vulnerability equaled weakness, and I could not afford to be weak. I did not want people to take advantage of me. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you know that I have struggled a lot with being, I guess the term is like a people pleaser, always wanting to make other people happy, always putting the needs of other people before myself. And that actually acted as a way for me to protect myself. Because if I was very focused on other people, if I was very focused on meeting their needs and making sure everything was taken care of for them and making sure that all of, what they wanted was put before anything that I wanted, I didn't really have to be vulnerable because I didn't have to have the conversation about what I wanted. I didn't have to talk about what I needed because I was very focused on them. And that allowed me to essentially build up a wall where I didn't have to let anyone back there because I was so focused on them, I didn't give them time to focus on me, which also meant that I didn't focus on me either. And I know there are a lot of other folks out there right now who are in that same place, who spend a lot of their time focusing on others, and conversely, they're not focusing on themselves. Hi, Renee. Thanks for joining us tonight. Tonight we are talking all about vulnerability and what that really means. And this is kind of a touchy topic for some people because, like I said, a lot of people look at vulnerability and think weakness. However, there is a great strength in being vulnerable and being vulnerable in an appropriate way. And what I mean by appropriate is, yes, protecting yourself is natural. It is a very natural instinct, especially if you are a person who has been hurt in the past, especially if you are someone who is not very trusting of others because of what you're coming from, the situations you're coming from, your experiences, your perspective. However, being vulnerable and being open provides great strength because you can build relationships. You can build relationships with other people. You can find where your healthy boundaries are to trust. You know that you can build a circle where you've got people who you can depend on, where if there's trouble, you know where to go. And then you can turn around and you're extending that same trust to them so they can trust you. They can be open, they can be vulnerable with you, and that may be a saving grace for them. You may have found yourself in a situation where you have struggled with something and you've been able to overcome that struggle, or you've been able to work through it. And because of the relationship that you have built with that other person, because they trust you, because you're a safe place, because they know that they can be vulnerable and open with you, they can come to you and they can tell you what that issue is, and you can help walk them through it. You can help another human being overcome their struggle, because you are willing to be open and vulnerable. So like I said, protecting yourself is a very natural instinct. And believe me, I know. I used to love my wall. I used to love hide behind my wall. There were lots of bricks in it. And over the past few years, I've undergone some interesting relationships with some people that have kind of helped me tear down those bricks, one at a time. And it's a slow process. It was very, very slow in being able to take those bricks down one at a time and being able to understand that not only was I able to let someone else in and be able to show them, more or less the real me, I was also able to take those bricks down from in front of my face and look at myself too. I was able to take that down and say, okay, yes, we have issues. Yes, we have flaws. Yes, we have things that we're not happy with and we're not proud of. But being willing and able to admit that to yourself opens up the door for you to be able to look for ways to make improvements. If you look in the mirror and you think you are slap old perfect and there is nothing that you need to change, congratulations. Unfortunately, there may be a little bit of an honesty issue there because we all have things that we can change. We all have things that we can do better to improve ourselves. We all do. Being honest with yourself to realize that is a really important step in your journey. So as you are thinking about what it means to be vulnerable, as you are looking for the areas in your life where you have been too vulnerable, that's a place where you can start to set healthy boundaries. If you have been to a point where you are so open that you allow people to walk all over you anytime that they want, there are some healthy boundaries that need to be set there. If you are in a place where you never, ever, ever let anyone in, you never let anyone get close to you, you never let anyone know about your dreams, about what you think, about your honest opinion on things, then it's time to start small and start trusting. And you can take that one step at a time. Start with something little and let it build, let it grow, and slowly let yourself open up to be vulnerable with another person so that you can build a healthy relationship. In the same respect, start small with yourself. Go ahead and look at those areas where there are some improvements to be made. Accept that there are some improvements to be made, and instead of beating yourself up about it, or instead of falling prey to negative self-talk and telling yourself, well, this is why I can't get anything done because I'm not good enough and blah blah blah, all that nasty stuff that can happen in between our ears, start opening yourself up to not only what can be changed, but how you can change it, and the benefit that you will reap from making those small changes. Anytime that we're undergoing change, anytime that something is new or different, it can be difficult. It can be extremely hard to open yourself up to another person. It can be even more difficult to open yourself up to you. You spend the most time with yourself. You should be the most honest with yourself. You should be the most vulnerable with yourself. But a lot of times that's just not the case. A lot of times it's just not. And that, again, I get a little, about that because that really was me for a very long time. I was unwilling to be vulnerable with myself and be honest with myself because I didn't want to be there. I was unwilling to be vulnerable with other people because I didn't want to trust. I had bad experiences. It was easier if I just focused on them and didn't worry about me, but I was doing myself a horrible disservice in that. And if you find yourself in that same place, you are also doing yourself a disservice because you are worth having a wonderful, trusting relationship with another human being. You are worth having a trusting relationship with yourself. And that is one of the places where you can really start to see whether or not you're being vulnerable with yourself is, do you trust yourself? Do you trust the decisions that you make? Do you trust that when you find yourself in a situation, you're going to know how to handle it? That is a really great place to start when you're looking to see whether or not you're being vulnerable with you. If you want to see if you're being vulnerable with someone else, again, start with the trust factor. Do you trust them? Do you believe what they tell you? Are you honest with them? Are they honest with you? And then you can start to build from there. And this, like anything else, is a practice. We never arrive at anything. We're always learning, growing, developing. And so being able to be vulnerable is a practice. And as you gain trust in yourself, you'll know how to trust your intuition, how to trust that little voice, not the one that talks all the bad stuff, but that little voice inside your head that says, either, yeah, this is a good thing, or, there may be a little bit of danger there. If your intuition throws up a serious red flag, pay attention to it. Don't open yourself up to people that your gut is telling you it's going to end badly. Go ahead and save yourself the trouble on that one. That doesn't mean never open yourself up to anyone. That means trust your intuition. Trust your discernment to know whether or not this is a good decision or not. And then build on that one step at a time. One step at a time is all it takes. So that is that's our topic for tonight, vulnerability and what it really means. I hope that you have taken away from this that vulnerability is not a weakness. Vulnerability actually provides a foundation for great strength. So if this has been helpful to you, please like and share the video. Tag someone that you think needs to watch it. It's always appreciated. And until next week, I hope you have a fabulous week, and I will see you here next Friday night at 9 o'clock. Take care.